Part 1, we finished on a very abrupt note because I was being interrupted by a next class coming in. But we were talking about selectors. Congrats if you made it all the way through that video. Now that we've done or spoken about selectors, we're going to see if we can apply them to our CSS cheat sheet. We just went through descendant selectors, and then we spoke about the HTML family, and we have spoken about reading selectors. If you're not aware of all of these three things, go back to the final minutes of the last video. What I would like for us to do, open up your CSS cheat sheet documents, so the HTML and the CSS file. Then what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can write in some descendant selectors within our CSS code. So a really good example of where we have strong text, for example, here, that is inside of a paragraph, and we might only want to affect one strong sentence and not the next. Is a good example of where we can use a descendant. So let's start off in our paragraph section. If I just write the word strong and then my curly brackets, and I say I want to have a color of blue, I don't know. All right, and if I save both of those, as I've been telling you before, it'll change all of the strong text to blue. I only think I want it to occur in the second paragraph, so in this section here. So knowing that, I am thinking I will make it strong P. Okay, so if I do P space, and I do that, and I do that, what you will notice is it won't change. Okay, now I have used a descendant selector. However, if we look here, the strong and the P is in all three of them, so that is not working. Okay, so hopefully you realized what I was getting at and you realized my mistake. So what I'm needing to do now is I'm needing to go up slightly higher in my paragraph, in my section, to find something else. Now, if I look up here, I could use H2 because that's in the same HTML family, but there's a H2 up here as well. The only thing that is different compared to this paragraph and this paragraph is my selection. I have a class over here and I have an ID here. So what I could do if I want to reference my one lone ID is I could ID and then P2. If I save that and then refresh, it's only made the paragraph, the paragraph with placeholder text blue in the middle paragraph. If I then wanted to make top and bottom pink or red, I would then, if we start from the beginning, if I go strong, color red, and we save that and we refresh. Now, our CSS is reading this code first, so it's making sure that that is staying as is. The ID is also stronger in its classification. So that means that whatever the ID says, it will stick with. Okay, so even though I've said all of my strong characters I want red, it's ignored that for the middle paragraph because I have chosen an ID selector for this middle one. So it's listening to the ID over a strong. Okay, now if that had not been the case, because my middle paragraph isn't an ID, I could instead write a grouping selector or a group selector. So a group selector is where you put, so the descendant selectors, we put a space in between our selectors and it reads backwards like we were saying beforehand, okay, to understand what it is that you're getting at within your family tree. If you're using a grouping selector, you want to select 3, 2, 5 different selectors to do all the same thing, okay, to have all the same stylization. So in our case, we want to have a comma in between our, just let me sort this out. We want to have a comma in between our class paragraph and our class paragraph. Now, these are both the same class. For some reason, I thought I wrote them as paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. So imagine that was the case. Then all I would have to do is write dot paragraph 1, comma, dot paragraph 2, because they're my two classes. And then here I include a space because these two things are descendants of that. Now I will have to do the same thing up here because I just changed my classes. I forgot my dot here. And there you have it. Okay, I don't have the brain power to work out why this is turned red for now. I have a feeling it's something to do with this up here. However, if we just wanted to confirm that this code was working, so this grouping was working, all we'd have to do is change that to H2 and then make sure, I've already tried it out, but make sure that it would transform so that then only your paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 were to change, okay? Meaning that it's not picking up all of our other H1s and H2s. Another example of your grouping you could do up the top here, so I could make my smaller headings, my heading 4, heading 5, and heading 6, much smaller. And then I don't need a comma after that one, curly brackets. If I change the background color to green, then that's what I have there. All right. So make sure that you've given yourself examples of group selectors. Make sure that you've given yourself examples of descendant selectors, and make sure that you have, I guess, trialed a bunch of different things. All right, next up, we're going to trial adding font into our HTML so that then we can change our text. So the way that we're going to do that, go again back to Daymap and lesson 1st of March, scroll down, we've got our HTML code that we copied, and we've got a bunch of websites. We've looked at the color-based ones so far. Let's now look at some font-based ones. So I'm going to open this website here, and I'm going to open this website here. Now, when it comes to font, there are 3 main ways that we can change our font. The first way is that we can just add in a generic font family or typeface name. So, for example, you could write serif, you could write Arial, you could write one of these font families, so on and so forth. Now, that's where the first website that we opened comes in, this one here, which is this one, okay? This website gives you percentages of whether a computer is likely to have a font or not. So for example, if you wanted to use Arial and you wanted to just type the name Arial into your code, 99.84% of Windows computers have Arial lodged within their browsers. So that would mean that you have a 99.84% chance that your font would work if you just type in the name. If, however, you wanted Avant-Garde, you've got a 0% chance of Windows computers having it. You get the idea? So if you want to take the risk, use one of these fonts. Be aware, however, that if your risk doesn't pay off, then, so like you type in a font in the computer that someone's opening it on happens to not have that font name, then you're going to end up with this generic font again. Okay. The second way that you can link in type different fonts is using the generic name, like we just said there, but using code that's sourced from one of these websites below, or I'm sure that there's other options out there as well. So these options are, again, the website that I just showed you, which is this one here. Okay, so if you want to confirm that your website will have the code, you can click on, say, Avant-Garde, as we were saying beforehand, and you have code here that you can copy. Here is your CSS code, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can have a play around with that. The other one that we can do is we can go through Google Fonts, which is fantastic. Okay, so what you would do is you would search for your font face or type that you like. I like to go here and untick and tick only the fonts that I think I'm looking for. So in this case, what I'd like you to look for is a display font or a title font for your headings, and I want you to also have a just generic plain looking text as well. So I quite like this lobster font here. So when you find one that you like, you're going to click on it and you're going to scroll down. If it is what you want, then go select this style. Then over on the side somewhere, I think it's up here at the moment, there is a list of all the fonts that you have liked. Now I'm going to remove that font because that was one of my old ones. Once you've got here, you have two options. You can simply copy this code and this code. This code here, I might do this right now. This code here goes into your HTML file. You're going to add it in the heading directly underneath your link for your CSS. So directly underneath your CSS link. And then the other form of code is going to go in as a declaration in your CSS file. So I'm going to change my global settings. I want all of my headings, so H1, H2, H3, H4, and H6, and then my curly bracket. And then I'm going to copy that declaration in there, okay? Now if I save and I find my browser, I have my headings changed. Okay, I'm going to now do the same thing for my other text. You're welcome to pause me. All right, I will quickly do it. Yeah, you're also welcome to skip forward. All right, if you get the idea. This time I'm going to change my display to a sans serif. And I am probably going to grab something that's looking a bit light. This one looks good. So I think I would like this one here. So I've added it to my style. Now I have both of these fonts in here now. Okay, so that means that both of them are in here as well. So what I need to do is perhaps copy this entire link. I'm going to delete what I copied in here earlier. So it was everything to there. And I've just added a little bit extra, okay? And then I'm going to only copy the bottom declaration, which is the lobster one. And in this case, I want to add it to all of my body text. So essentially everything, and then this declaration here will change just my headings. So if I save and refresh, there we have it. Okay, now if it was me, after doing this heading is too bold for some of my smaller text, and then this is probably too light. So if I was to reflect, I probably would go back and I would change some of these aspects, or I would change my color. But that's all about playing and adding and adjusting as we go. The final way that you can add in your text is to import. So download a font and then import using font face as your selector. Now, this can also be good. However, you would have to download the font and then re-upload the font to the internet, which would take time. So this is a much quicker process for the person using your website, whereas this here would require more downloading and uploading power from the user. Okay, once we've got our fonts themselves, we can do some stylization of those fonts too, which can be helpful for the problem that I was just saying about. So our different, not declarations, our properties that we can write into our declarations are these here. So what I want you to do in a second is have a play around with these. Okay, so far we have used, if we check back on our CSS, we have used font family to actually type in our font itself. So I was saying about some of my headings being too small. I could go in and I could adjust those. So the default browser setting supposedly is 16 pixels. We are mainly going to use pixels for our sizes. There are other values, you're welcome to use them. However, pixels is the easiest to manipulate. So far in our properties that we have here, we have used font family. Okay, so if we were to change the size of some of our text, let's use the font size and then adjust it with our pixels. So I'm going to begin with change my body. So I'm going to type in font size and just add to my declaration block. And then I'm going to let's try that 16 pixel rule and see whether it actually does sit at a average 16 size. So it appears it does. So I think I might like my body to be slightly smaller. So I'm going to go 14. And then it's made that text smaller. Now, if I was to change my headings, I obviously don't want all my headings to be the same size. So I would now have to probably go through and adjust my heading sizes if that's what I feel that I would like to do. Oh, wrong curly bracket. Okay, so if I go font size, maybe 30. This will just be a bit of a trial and error exercise on your part. It looks like 30 is what it starts at. Oh no, I wrote pixel around the wrong way. But it still looks like 30 is what we start at. Okay, all right, if I try 50. There we go, we see a big change, okay? Now, I was saying beforehand about some of my heading 6 being too small. So let's adjust that. And then with these two, I will also do the next step. So font size. Let's try 20. Okay. Now, the trouble with this is your headings, once you start changing sizes, really their only purpose then is use as selectors. Because as we can see, my heading 6 is now slightly larger than my heading 3, which is fine. You also notice the gap difference that it has made here. We're going to talk about that in a second. But before we do so, let's change one other aspect. I really like the thickness of this here. However, as discussed, some of my smaller headings, even the size of this one here, it is too thick. So I am going to go back to here and I'm going to look at my properties. I want to change my font weight. So that is going to be my property. Now, as far as font weight goes, we are wanting to look at a number somewhere in between this. So supposedly 100 is the lightest and 900 is the darkest. Now, this side of things blows my mind because depending on what the font is, sometimes you have an inherent value and then the lightest is 100 and then bolder is 400. But then if your inherent value doesn't start at 100 and it starts thicker, then your lightest is a different number and your boldest is a different number as well. So what I want you to take out of this is that each font family has a different inherent value and you might need to play with these things. Okay, for now I'm going to start at 100 and we're going to see what happens. Okay, by the looks of things, it has just decreased the size of my font size. So if I maybe make it 300, what happens? Interesting. Okay, so that's something that I want you to play around with. If I had more time, I would also be playing around with that. Again, we can also play around with our font style. So we could add in an italic or we could add in a bold as our value. We can add in font variance. We can add in line height. Let's talk about line height for a second. I'm pretty sure that is down here. Okay, so we also can add in text decoration. So we can add in a line underneath our text. We can add in a solid text decoration style. Okay, so there are other things that you can play around with. I'm not going to play around with them now. The one that I want you to be aware of is line height. Okay, so we again can use our pixels. Okay, the line height property sets the height of the space between the two lines. So we noticed beforehand that when we changed our text, I'm just going to get rid of this weighting. When we changed our text for our heading 6, it made this gap bigger. If we don't want that to be the case, we can change it like this, or we can change it with the next thing that I'm going to show you. So we can change our line height. Now, we want our line height to be, if we want it to be the same as it is right now, we want it to be the same as 20px. So if I change it to 20px, what should happen is nothing should change, essentially. Good. Okay. If we lower it, so if I made it 15px, then this is meant to decrease, which it did not. Instead, what decreased was the gap in between here and here. If I go again, let's have a look and see what happens. Okay, so you can see it's not decreasing this at all. It's just decreasing the size of the box that is around it. So in our case, because it's colored because of this here, our lime green, we can directly see what is changing. Okay, so with that in mind, that is a good segue. We are now going to start having a look at the box model.